Well, hello YouTubers, and welcome to another episode of Fork It. I know it's been a long time since I've done any more on this. I still have the material laying around the shop, but today we're putting together a V-block. Well, I shouldn't say put together. We're making a V-block out of a chunk of this old fork that one of the boss gave me here a while back. So I went and bought a cutter to make this groove with. Now there's a whole different way, there's a whole slew of ways you can do this. You can do it with an end mill by tilting the head of the mill, or you can tilt the vise on a tine table. I cheated, or did it the easy way. What do you mean cheated? I just got lazy and decided, well, get the cutter for it. And so let me zoom you in here and I'll show you this cutter that's on the mill here. So we're making a 90-degree V-block here. This is already pre-cut. I didn't want to bore you guys with the abstruse details of squaring up a block and all that. I mean, that's save you the agony. But to do a test run here, I did this side already. This is going to be the shallow side of the block. I'm going to make a V-block with two different depths to it. The important thing is that you got to watch out for is that you tram in your vise so that as the table travels, it's the vise jaws are nice and parallel with the table, so that way you don't get a V that's a little out of shape. The both edges, the top and bottom edges, you want to have parallel. Otherwise, if your vise is out of square ever so slightly, one end of the block is going to be a little wider, and then you won't have a square, or your work won't lay into the. It'll lay into the groove all right, but it won't be square to the world and square to the block. So you got to have these nice and parallel in order to make that happen. And the only way to get that, like I said, is to tram in the vise. So I bought this cutter in eBay. It's a new old stock, and didn't cost much, like 30 bucks or whatever it was. Anyway, we got on the tip here. Let's see if we can see that. Yeah, there's a 90-degree angle here, so we're going to make a, like I said, a 90-degree V-block. You can make 60 degrees. I've also got a cutter for that, but today we're making a 90. And later on, as this advances, this cutter is only 22 millimeters thick. So what I'm going to have to do is drop the table or raise the head, whichever you want to, which way you want to see it, and then make the V-groove in here wider. And then I'm going to have to drop the bring the table back up to where it was originally, and then we can advance into the cut a little deeper to get a deeper cut. This side over here is 10 millimeters, which is a Scotia over 3/8, and this one here is going to end up being a 15 millimeter depth. And so I'm going to have to drop the table by let's see, 5 millimeters, and then raise it back up 5 millimeters in order to get on the center again. And what I'm going to do is flip the block end for end to mill the other side instead of raising the table back up, because I don't have enough clearance underneath here. There's a screw that holds this. I'll bring here's the picture. This screw down here will interfere with the vise jaw, and so I've got to make sure that I don't run into that. So let's go ahead and take another cut and show you how this kind of runs through. I'll bring the camera around to the other side too and show you from a different vantage point here in a second. Okay, I'm going to advance 1 millimeter. I'm only taking 1 millimeter depth of cut because I don't want to ruin this cutter. I'm not familiar with it all that much, so I'm not sure how it's going to act or how it's going to act. And this is some really tough material. It's an old forklift fork and it's been forged, so it's harder than a Hubs the hell. This is my cheap Chinese arbor, which you can hear it has some run out in it. And as these cuts get deeper, this thing gets louder because of the way the arbor is out of round. You only have a few teeth hitting, so then it starts kind of chattering a little bit. But anyway, the rest is a rinse and repeat. I'll bring you guys back when I get to ready to drop the table. When the cut is deep enough, I'm going to bring it in 10 millimeters, like I said. And then drop the table 5, and we'll start taking another cut from there, and we'll show you how that winds up going. We've got our groove cut in the piece here, so now we're going to reset the table, drop it down 5 millimeters, and reset to 0. So first we're going to run it back out to where it was originally. Back to 0, where it originally touched off. Took up the slack to get rid of the backlash there. So there we're at. So now we're going to drop the table 5 millimeters. And run it back up to pick up the backlash again. Oops, that was a little too far. Now we're back at 0. On this machine, 2 revolutions on the hand crank is 5 millimeters in elevation. So now we're going to go ahead and bring in the cutter. So now we're going to take bring it out 1. And see how we're doing. Oh boy, we have to bring it out a whole lot more. So we're going to bring it out to 5. And this will be barely touching, yeah. So now we can take another millimeter out. So now we're taking a millimeter cut. I'm going to focus you in here. So now we're going to take a millimeter right here off the top. Hopefully it'll run a little quieter now. It was getting pretty loud on that last cut. Until we get to our 5 millimeter depth. So now we're in the setup phase on the grinding the V of the V-block here. Now keep in mind this is an extremely dangerous situation. Here's a close-up of the setup at work. Now, as you can see, the block is perched on the very edge of the magnetic chuck. Now, one word of caution. A good friend of mine always said, anything not checked is usually wrong. And boy, in this case, was he right on the money. When I set this thing up initially, got this guard back here that was in the way. The mag chuck was not in parallel with the stone. So when I set it up, I kind of figured, you know, there was going to be some issues. And what I did is I dressed up the edge of the mag chuck with the stone. And what happened there too was, I mean, this is talk about bozo moments here. Not intentionally, it's just the way it kind of worked out. The stone kind of spun loose on the arbor, so I had to retighten it after grinding this edge. But also, I didn't have a whole lot of contact surface on the mag chuck, so I had to find the widest one that I had, the most stable, and start off with that one and then work my way into the smaller side of it. So now that I got the small side ground, I've got the bigger one on here, and there's even less contact area for this V-block on the mag chuck. So, you know, talk about a touchy setup. So here we are, handheld, as you can see. Here's the edge of the mag chuck, and this is how precariously close this is balanced. You can barely see a little bit of light between the stone and the workpiece. You know, there's not going to be any advance on the feed. All you're doing is going back and forth. You got to bring out the whole unit to the stone to where you've only got maybe a couple of thousandths between the stone and the workpiece. I mean, talk about paper thin, cutting it close. You can barely see daylight through there because you have to cover the whole contact surface of this V-block on the inside, and so that's what that groove in the bottom is for, so that you have a clearance there, so when you're grinding it, you don't create a U-shape in the bottom of your V-block. So once I got that all set up, then I could start grinding and talk about taking light cuts. Now each division on this wheel is 0.005 of a millimeter, so I'm only taking one division at a time. I bring this thing in to where it barely makes contact, start up the feed back and forth, and then let it just barely skimp. I mean, and then for the final cut, I slow the feed way down. You can do that on this machine. There's a control knob here. This is a hydraulic feed, so you can you can slow the feed way down. And so now we're at the point where we can get this grinding finished, and then I already got some slots cut in here, but I wanted to jump ahead. The slot cutting is, you know, nothing special. It's just run-of-the-mill stuff. And so once I get the grinding done, I'll bring you guys back in for a close-up view of how it looks. And one of the things, like this, you know, at the beginning of this grinding setup, when the block came into and bumped into here, it pushed it into the stone, and I had to wind up taking a few more passes on one side than the other in order to get rid of those dingus McGee's and those apprentice marks there that were created by the impact of the block into the guard, into the stone, and oh Christ, what a mess. So anyway, like I said, these are things you really got to, you know, heads up on. If your mag chuck if you don't have a real powerful one, this one here, if I put this block onto the mag chuck, you're not pulling it off. I don't care how strong you are. I've tried everything in the book to get this stupid thing off of there, and it's virtually impossible to get. I mean, this is a strong mag chuck, and despite its strength on this edge here, and it does have quite a bit of sticky on the edge, it's still a real touchy setup. So it's something you really, I don't recommend you try this at home. Let's put it that way. For you guys, I didn't just, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of options, so I thought, well, we'll give it a try like this and see how it works out. If not, I'll have to get a square block and somehow clamp it to a square block and put that on top of the mag chuck and run it that way. Luckily, this worked out okay after, you know, certain startup difficulties, but I'm pretty pleased with the end results. So let me bring you guys back around here and take a look at the finished product when it's done. So there's the finished product. As you can see, well, the finish isn't all that great. Had to really slow the feed down. Let's see if we can get a better vantage point here. There we go. And like I said, there's some slots here. These are just 6 millimeter deep, 12 millimeter wide, and I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side so that this is a good V-block, and then it's going to get cut in half, and then the two sawn ends are going to get worked so that they're a parallel length. I'll probably make another episode on the clamps. Let me get this thing put on the tripod here. Well, YouTubers, that's a wrap for this episode of Fork It, the V-block. You know, I could show you the rest of the stuff. It's just tedious. The same thing, slot milling, you know, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, what can I say? But the most exciting part you got to see already, which was the grind and, of course, the V-block, or the V-cut itself. Used, like I said, a special cutter for that, and worked out pretty good all in all. The bozo moments, luckily I didn't videotape those, so I guess you guys missed out on a good laugh, but there for a minute it was getting kind of hairy. So anyway, like I said, I don't recommend anybody do this at home or try this without making a dry run of it first, and know your machine when you set this kind of thing up, because you can run into some real bad surprises. I thought I knew this machine fairly well, and it turns out that there were still a few little hidden items that I wasn't aware of. So it always pays to check, double check, and sometimes triple check your work before you actually let her rip. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Fork It, the V-block. And come back for the next portion of this when I make the clamps for it. So stay tuned and enjoy. And for you guys out there who would like to share your thoughts and comments, by all means leave a comment in the comment section below, and we'll see you guys again soon.